Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, this is your Inept General, and today we're going to bring you some Total War Warhammer news. It's not exactly breaking, it was released a couple of days ago, and even before that we had a very good idea from the trailer and some of the stuff that Creative Assembly had already said about the roster for the Tomb Kings and the upcoming DLC. But you know what, I thought, why not, let's just go over the official roster reveal with you guys now. A couple of days late, apologies for that. And we got some campaign information that we'll go over after the roster as well. But without further ado, let's kick things off, really. And let's start things off with the Lords of the Armies, the General. Now, we already know that the sort of faction is going to be led by Cetra, Khalida, and we also have Grand Hierophant Katep, as well as Arkin the Black, the servant of Nagashi. Now, if you guys haven't checked it out, I've only done one full lore video for one of these guys so far. I'm hoping to cover all four before the DLC is released, but bear with me while I work on those. But if you want to check out the Khalida lore and find out everything about Queen Khalida, the leader of Libaras, do check out the video popping up in the top right-hand corner now, or you'll find a link in the description below to get her story. But we're just looking at the kind of generic army, as it were, and the only general for the Tomb Kings really is the Tomb King himself. Now, there are a number of different Tomb Kings, and it looks like the only sort of generals we'll have in the armies are the Tomb Kings. Now, in the rulebook, you also used to have a sort of magical general, the High Lich Priest, but it looks like they're forgoing that option, at least for now. So moving on from that, that's really all the generals covered. We have the heroes, and we have the Tomb Prince, which is kind of just a downgraded version of the Tomb King to begin with. And we have the Lich Priest, your magic users. Now, if I remember correctly, I don't have a reference in front of me, but just off the head in the tabletop, and they've usually been quite accurate, these guys will have access to the Lore of Nehekara, the Lore of Shadow, and I think the Lore of Light. I think that's it. I might be wrong on that. I might have to check. At least that's what it was on the tabletop. So I'm assuming it'll be the same in Total War Warhammer 2. And we have the Necrotech, the architects, the guys responsible for looking after all the construct creatures, all the statues brought to life in the Tomb King army. Also renowned as being pretty arseholey as well, just as people go, as humans beings go, really. So the Necrotechs are the other type of hero that we have confirmed in the Tomb King army. And now we go on to the Infantry. We have Skeleton Warriors, which seem like they've showed some of the statistics in the campaign thing, and it seems like these guys kind of might be dirt. Like, not particularly good. They will... Now, I think they said somewhere in the campaign run-through, guys, that the Tomb King armies are limited by the buildings they have to recruit certain units. But as I understood it watching that campaign video, it looks like the Skeleton Warriors will be just sort of, you won't have a cap on them. So you'll be able to recruit as many of them as you want, but they're not very good. They're almost equivalent to kind of peasants, I think, really, for the Bretonnian army. But we have the Skeleton Warriors, and there was also a new unit, it seems they've invented in the official roster reveal, called the Nehekaran Warrior, Nehekaran Warrior even, and that just seems like an upgrade from the Skeleton Warrior, somewhere in between Skeleton Warriors and the Tomb Kings, really, Tomb Guards, sorry, really. So those are the Skeleton Warriors that we are definitely getting. We are also getting Skeleton Archers, which is great, something that very much distinguishes the Tomb Kings from the Vampire Counts, although in terms of their style of play, they're also very different. But, you know, one of the iconic units of the Tomb Kings. We also have, of course, the Tomb Guard, who are the elite of the infantry fighting force that the Tomb Kings have. And it looks like we'll have the Tomb Guard with like a sword, and then we'll have a Tomb Guard with a halberd, at least according to the roster. So that's something to look forward to. We will have the halberd version of these guys as well. And so moving on from the regular infantry, let's go on to the cavalry that we've been confirmed in the game. And we have skeleton horsemen who will act very much like your kind of light cav, one has to imagine. And you have your skeleton horse archers, again, light cav, but with bows that will go around. So good to have both of them in the roster. You also have the chariots. Now, chariots are the things that really made the Tomb King stand out. They did not have to have sort of a limited amount of chariots in any Tomb King army on the tabletop. That was kind of their distinguishing feature. And of course, chariots are going to be playing a part as a unit in the Total War Warhammer version of the game. It looks like you will have the skeleton chariots, and you'll have an archer variant on the chariots as well. That's what it looks like we'll have on the roster. So 2 different kinds of skeleton chariots there for us to recruit. Now, I've kind of separated this out because these are the constructs. These are kind of the living statues brought to life, and it covers a broad kind of area, but I thought I'd clump them all together like I did in the potential army video. So for the constructs, we have Ushabti. Now, it looks like we have the Ushabti with bows for sure. So we get the Great Bow Ushabti. And it looks like we are going to have the just regular Ushabti as well. Now, yeah, those are the 2 variants. So yeah, that looks like what we're getting for the two different types of Ushabti. No, not as varied as, say, like the Minotaurs or anything like that, but it just looks like there's going to be the melee Ushabti and the missile Ushabti. So yeah, great unit. I think they, from what I've seen in the trailers and everything so far, they look great in the game. Can't wait to get them on the battlefield. We also have the Tomb Scorpions. Now, these guys are great Lich Priests when they kind of don't die, but can no longer really function as a sort of moving around body, are put into these things, and they take them over, and that's what their souls go into, and they're becoming this living, writhing scorpion that looks horrendous. So great to see the Tomb Scorpions. This was one I thought we might end up losing on the cutting room floor, if I'm honest, but delighted to see they made the cut. We also have the Necropolis Knights, guys on massive snake statues that have been brought to life. Very daunting, probably acting as some kind of shock cavalry. Now, these guys have 2 variants, it looks like. It looks like we'll get the normal Necropolis Knights, who I have to imagine is probably a shield and hand weapon. And then it looks like we'll get a halberd type. So that'll probably be the anti-large variant, if I'm going to have to guess. So that's what we have for the Necropolis Knights. And we have the Sepulchral, I never know how to say that right, Stalkers. These guys are great kind of ambush killers, and they are going to appear in the game. I have to imagine great for sort of maybe, I'm guessing, yeah, just for like maybe ambushes and stuff like that. That's kind of the idea they have with them in the lore. But that's these guys looking great. And I've seen the animations of them as well. Looks pretty good on that front in terms of the trailer and stuff. The Cavalry War Sphinx, the big boy, we're definitely going to get them in the game. Now, I believe they did say earlier, before today's roster reveal, that these guys... Well, no, it wasn't from that. It was from the trailer. You saw I think you saw 2 variants of it, of just like as a mount for a lord, as it is in the tabletop, and I think as a kind of thing where a few guys potter around on top of it, as we see in the model here. We could see that from the trailer, so we've got that from there, so we know that you'll be able to have kind of both types here, one has to imagine. And we have the Necrosphinx. That goes around. In the roster reveal, they said it has the biggest anti-large bonus of them all. And that was kind of the idea of the model on the tabletop as well. It really was a monster killer. And it looks like that's kind of what they're trying to get it to live up to in Total War Warhammer 2 as well. But great to see these guys in the game. I'm not sure, maybe you guys have seen and I haven't. I'm not sure if they've resolved the issue that on the tabletop at least, these guys could fly. And I'm not sure if they've dealt with that. I haven't seen that from any of the trailers or any of the campaign footage so far, whether the Necrosphinxes fly. There's also, of course, the Hyro Titan, the big daddy, the laser eye shooting mofo. And it looks like they've kind of used this model as kind of the basis to make their in-game model. I think it looks really great. He has the scales and the staff. And yeah, it's great to have him in the game. Yeah, really kind of a bonus, particularly considering that Games Workshop never actually made a model for them. And this is kind of a fan-made one, but really beautifully nice of them to do. And yeah, can't wait to see this big boy in the game and how useful. And moving on to sort of more the creatures of the Tomb King army, we have the Carrion, and we have them confirmed, big vulture birds that were entombed with the Tomb Kings, but have since gone kind of extinct in the Warhammer world, but were brought back to life with the rest of the Tomb Kings. I think that's the idea of the Carrion, at least. And that's about it. That's the only kind of bestial kind of animals we have in the Tomb King army. And we have artillery, and we have the Screaming Skull catapult, kind of the only official piece of artillery that the Tomb Kings have brought in. I've kind of said my piece about the Screaming Skull catapult before, but yeah, just my only minor disappointment with this is it's just kind of one sort of magical skull that they fire, whereas I thought it'd be more of a scattering of many skulls. That's kind of how it's written in the lore, but it's alright. I understand why they did it. But yes, the Screaming Skull catapult will make an appearance. And we also have the Casket of Souls. Now, from what I understand in the roster reveal, it sounds like what they've done with the Casket of Skulls is kind of what I theorized they'd do. And that is that they've kind of made it a moving artillery piece, from what I could understand from the roster reveal. So yeah, it looks like that's how it will fit into it. Whereas on the tabletop, the Casket of Skulls kind of did damage to everything if you failed a dice roll. It didn't really have, it wasn't a missile or anything, it was just like souls going out and then damaging people all around them. But it looks like it's now a moving artillery piece, which was kind of the only real interpretation I think you could have taken for the Casket of Souls, but great to see it in the game. I have to applaud them for including it at all. So, in terms of all that, that's kind of a lot. So let's look at what's actually missing from the roster. And it's not a huge amount, guys, to be honest. It's one of the fullest rosters we've had in Total War Warhammer. And what we're missing is the High Lich Priest, which is the Magic General type I mentioned at the top of the video. We don't have these guys as a general option, although we do have 2, if not 3 legendary lords who can use magic. So we're going to have to wait and see if they ever make an introduction to the High Lich Priest later on in the game. And we're missing as a hero the Tomb Herald, but we did kind of hypothesize that the battle standard bearers haven't really ever been translated into Total War Warhammer, so it was unlikely we were going to see the Tomb Herald. They do have a great concept. Technically, they are any Tomb King's best warrior, so it would have been cool to see them, but instead it looks like we got the Tomb Princes, which I get, but the Tomb Heralds might be a bit more interesting. But we're unfortunately not seeing the Tomb Heralds. We are now not missing, this is kind of the big one. This is the Jabba's Life of the Tomb King roster, and that is the Necrolith Colossus, the huge giant. Now, people have misconstrued it as a bone giant. It's not, in fact, a bone giant. It's a statue made to look of a skeleton that's been brought to life, so it's more of a construct. And it had the ability to have sort of hand weapons or a great bow. So unfortunately, it's sad not to see a kind of... And the bow acted effectively like a ballista, because it's a giant with a huge bow. It was basically a ballista. But it's a shame not to see them. I think this is the only one I'm really upset about not being in the roster. But I can also see... And I've made the argument before how I can see that they could feel maybe the gaps that the Necrolith Colossus was maybe filled. And the other one is the Tomb Swarm, which are missing, but not really. They've kind of appeared, I believe they've said previously, in the form of a magic spell, or a right ability, or an army ability. So we won't see Tomb Swarms officially as a unit you can move around, but they do kind of appear in the game nonetheless, which is a good value, which is a good aspect to have. Now, what I will say about the whole roster is basically complete. One big missing aspect, and that's the Necrolith Colossus. Other than that, I'm pretty delighted with it. I hope you guys are too, and can't wait to get my hand on them to do battle in the deserts of Nehekara. So apart from that, let's go over some of the stuff we saw in the video on the campaign, and there's just a couple of highlights. I think most of it we've seen before in some of the other footage that Creative Assembly has released, but we'll just go over some of the highlights that I thought was maybe worth pointing out that drew my attention. And the first of them is just the rights. Now, we've seen the rights. They've been shown throughout all the new Total War Warhammer 2 races. Hopefully, we'll see them introduce some rights for the Total War Warhammer 1 races. That would be great. But we have the one where you can get the Casket of Souls, much like the Dark Elves, where you could get the Black Ark, or the Lizard Men, where you can get the Slan Mage Priest. There's just a unit that you can get, but you're limited by the amount of time you can afford to do that ritual. We also have the Necrotech that can raise up a ruin. Now, outside of the beginning part of the game, I'm not sure how useful that ritual is. Unless you're really into raising settlements and then rebuilding them, which would seem a bit counterintuitive to begin with. But I suppose if it was already a beaten up main settlement and then you just raised it and then brought this guy in, that would probably be a cool way of doing it. But, you know, limited use. I'm not sure how much I'd use that in a campaign myself. The other two are handy in the right situations. The ambush chance with the sandstorm and the growth just as a bonus to when you're wanting to build, when you're wanting to get your city and civilization just going. Give it a bit of a kickstart. Then we have just this. Now, this isn't really an aspect, but I like the map detail here with the Mortis River, which was turned red with blood by Nagashi during his ritual, just trying to mess over the whole of Nehikara. And I like that they've rendered that in the campaign map, and it pours blood red into the ocean. I think that was just a nice little touch that I caught in their campaign video that I really enjoyed. Just goes to some of the great sort of world building they've been doing over there at Creative Assembly for the campaign map and how they've improved this part of the world, it seems, for the Tomb King campaign. Next up was this. I just want to draw your attention to the left-hand side. It gives us an idea of what the Necrotechs do on the campaign map, and it looks like something we haven't seen in Total War Warhammer before, and that's the increased mobility. We've seen the boost income, the damage walls, the hero wound, and the block army, but increased mobility is something very interesting as an ability for a hero to have, and probably like really invaluable when it comes down to the campaign if you get that all the way up. So looking forward to seeing how that's implemented in the game. Next up, we have the Mortuary Cult. Now, we were told about this previously, I think in the build-up to the DLC release, but the Mortuary Cult is where you can spend your sort of secondary currency, and they kind of spoke about it in vague terms, but it looks like this is the whole market. You have Legions of Legend, you have weapons, you have armor, you have enchanted items, talisman, arcane items. Now, everything from weapons onwards is just an item that you can equip on your general, but Legions of Legend we see here are sort of a step above Regiments of Renown. Now, from what I understand from the early stuff they told us, was that the Legions of Legend will not be available for multiplayer battles. They're just too OP. They're more for you to have fun around on the campaign, but the Regiments of Renown will be available in multiplayer battles, as far as I understand it. But that's what we have so far. But yeah, I like it. It's a combining stuff like you need certain resources, certain amount of cash, certain amount of the secondary currency there as well. Yeah, it seems fun. Seems like a good way of it. Now, what the issue will be is how limited you are from picking stuff up normally compared to other races. I'd have to imagine they turned all the percentages on that stuff down, but we'll have to wait and see to kind of force you into this marketplace to really equip up your generals and heroes. But it's a fun idea. I like the concept. And here we have the books of Nagashi and how you can find them. So this was a mechanic they talked about previously, but it's good to see how they do it. Now, from what I can see, each book is represented on the map. Now, from the Vortex campaign and from the campaign video they showed, it looks like you only need 5 of them. You don't need all the books of Nagashi, apparently. So each one, as they've talked about, gives you different bonuses and buffs. And I believe there's an element of randomness about these as well. I think they get switched around from campaign to campaign, which makes every campaign slightly different, as I understand from the stuff they've told us previously. We also have the sort of what you need to do to get the book. And I imagine there's something you need to do to get the book at all these locations around the map. But I like the mechanic. It's not just, it's very different from the Vortex campaign, and I like that idea. Now, I think we have been told that you will see cinematics each time you pick up one of these books. So there is the story unfolding. So looking forward to seeing what that will be and whether it will involve the big boy Nagashi himself. We'll have to wait and see. But cool, and it's kind of an interesting take on the Vortex campaign. Now, assuming this is the Vortex campaign, just looking at the information, I'm trying to remember looking back at that video whether it was or not, but it's very interesting to see that you don't actually have the counter on the top row that you would have in the Vortex campaign that tells you where the other races are. So I guess you're just taken out of that aspect that you can be beaten as the Tomb Kings as opposed to other races beaten to the end goal in the Vortex campaign. I suppose that's not really an issue with these guys, but we'll have to wait and see. Next one I wanted to point out is Arkin the Black, and they mentioned the idea when they announced that Arkin the Black would have the ability to recruit vampire count units. Now, what those were or what form that took, we weren't really sure, but now we can see from the campaign that it's kind of a building tree, and it looks like he'll only have access to 4 undead units as far as I understand it. That's the Hex Wraiths, the Fellbats, the Ghouls, and the dogs. I can't remember what the dogs were called. The hounds, the undead hounds or whatever it is. So that's kind of limiting, and I suppose that's a kind of a good get early game maybe, but the Hex Wraiths are always handy with their armor piercing and stuff like that. But the other ones aren't really units I fell in love with in the Vampire Count army, so not sure how much I'll be keen to use them as Arkin the Black. But that's what you looks like he'll be getting. He may get more, I don't know, but that's what it looks like he'll be getting. And we also have here just the kind of building structures and how you can see that each building gives you a certain amount of different units. For example, the Royal Barracks gives you 2 units, 2 extra capacity for Nehekaran warriors, skeleton archers, tomb guard with halberds, and it unlocks that recruitment of them as well. So it's good to know how exactly that will work, that buildings will sort of limit the amount of elite units you can have, almost like the Amber system for the Wood Elves, except a bit more direct with unit caps on them. So it's an interesting idea. I think it would make it play very differently to anything we've had so far in Total War or Total War Warhammer 2. So I like it. I like the concept. And here we just got some stats for some Skeleton Warriors. I'm sure we've seen these elsewhere, but just wanted to point out sort of how trash they are. And as I mentioned earlier in this video, it looks like these guys, and they mentioned it, I think, in the campaign thing, are the only warriors that are not capped. So you can have infinite Skeleton Warriors, so you can just keep going. And I think there's a Spearman variant as well. But looking at the stats, and I think, yeah, looking at the stats, they're kind of garbage. So I think that's the idea of them. They're just kind of to fill up the bodies, give you some troops to throw at the enemy, really. And then we have the research, and I think this is research. This is kind of what they described as the dynasties. This is how you unlock armies, and we can see the research stuff here. Now, from here, it looks like there's no through line, so none of these different branches are connected. So it looks like what you can do is just skip around to the stuff you want that's the most useful. Now, looking at either side of them, we see that there's 18 on each. So I think what happens is, yeah, there's 18 on each. So it just looks like you can kind of pick your own way to research and how you want to go up the tree yourself. So that's an interesting, different approach to research as well for the Tomb Kings. All in all, it's really shaping up to be a very unique faction, not both in terms of the way it looks, because all the factions are very sort of unique in the way they look, but in the way they'll play in the campaign, in the way their research works, in the way their magical items work, in the way their armies work. And I think that'll bring something really new to the whole franchise, and I'm looking forward to really playing it. Other than that, guys, that's about it from me. Hope you enjoyed this brief overlook, and as always, hope to catch you on the next one. Alright guys, bye.